So for the last 3 weeks on the channel, we have ranked every single undefeated team, and last weekend we ranked all 16. The only unbeaten team to lose this week was Kansas, so we now have 15 teams to rank. Surprisingly, there's actually a lot of changes, but before we get started, we're on the road to 100K, so quickly be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like if you want to support what I'm doing here, let me know what topic I can cover next, and turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's rank all the unbeaten teams. So in 15th, we're going to have Coastal Carolina. This team just cannot seem to lose. Ever since Jamie Chadwell took over, the Chanticleer's program has been on the rise, and so far this year, they're in great shape. The team is currently 6-0, as they've beaten Army, Gardner-Webb, Buffalo, Georgia State, Georgia Southern, and then this past weekend, Louisiana Monroe. This was by 1 touchdown, and while other games have been too close for comfort as of late, the Chanticleers are already eligible for a bowl in mid-October. Good for them. At number 14, we have James Madison. This is their first year in FBS, and you could say it's gone pretty well. They are now ranked number 25 in the country after a 5-0 start. In week 1, they beat Middle Tennessee, before they beat Norfolk State, Appalachian State, Texas State, and then most recently Arkansas State. While the only win that really pops off the page is the App State game, the Dukes are definitely worthy of being a top 25 team, and this has been a very exciting season for them. Later on, they play teams such as Louisville and Coastal Carolina, so both of those games are going to be fun to watch. If you guys remember back to 2018, Syracuse had a breakout season with Eric Dungy at quarterback. A couple years later, they are now off to another terrific start. After a week 1 beatdown against Louisville, the Orange have now won 4 straight games. Wins came against UConn, Purdue, Virginia, and Wagner, and while the Purdue and Virginia games were both very close, they have found a way to win, and both Garrett Schrader and Sean Tucker are one of the best 1-2 punches of any running offense in college football. The Orange are currently ranked number 18, but we're going to find out a lot in the next 3 weeks as they play NC State, Clemson, and Notre Dame. It's been a great story for now, but let's find out if the Orange are for real. While the Ole Miss Rebels are ranked number 9 in the country, it's really hard to justify them a top 10 unbeaten team for me. Led by USC transfer Jackson Dart and 4 different players at the running back position, Lane Kiffin has another good team. The Rebels are bowl eligible in mid-October, but the big question is, who have they really beat? They beat Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, Tulsa, and most recently Vanderbilt, and none of those 5 teams are any good. Their only decent win was a 3-point victory over number 7 Kentucky, but the Wildcats just lost to South Carolina last night, and it seems Kentucky is starting to fall off. It's still obviously a good win, and Kentucky is missing Will Levis, but Ole Miss still hasn't really popped off the page for me. With games against Auburn and LSU coming up, we're still not going to find out that much about Ole Miss. A&M, Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi State will be a tough way to finish the season though. UCLA has been a pleasant surprise. The team has won 9 games going back to last year, and after they were criticized for their horrible early season schedule, UCLA proved they belong this past weekend. They beat Bowling Green, Alabama State, and South Alabama in weeks 1 through 3 before they go on the road and beat Colorado. They get their first opportunity at a decent game against Washington, and they would upset the number 15 Huskies 40-32. Unfortunately, Washington is starting to fall off, but then this past weekend they beat Utah. Many have the Utes as the number 2 team in the Pac-12, but it looks like UCLA has now taken that spot. They dominated Utah in the second half and came away with a 10-point victory, and it would have been more if not for a DTR pick 6. Currently, UCLA is 6-0 and ranked number 11 in the country. They have legitimate Pac-12 title hopes and are a dark horse playoff contender right now. Penn State got a much-needed break this past weekend after struggling to put things together against Northwestern. Despite that slow game against the Wildcats, the Nittany Lions have gotten off to a great start this year. Led by 5th-year quarterback Sean Clifford, they go on the road and beat Purdue in week 1, and that win looks better and better each week right now. In week 2, they come home and beat Ohio before they go on the road and destroy Auburn. In week 4, they come back home and put away Central Michigan before they then win by 10 against Northwestern. While none of their last 4 wins look that great, I still think Penn State is a really good team, and they're pretty much balanced in every area, and we're going to find out if they're legitimate as they're going to go on the road to number 5 Michigan this weekend. For now, the Lions have had a great year, and let's see how it finishes. TCU has been one of the pleasant surprises of the 2022 season so far. In their first year away from Gary Patterson, Sonny Dykes has done a tremendous job. In week 1, they went on the road and beat Colorado before a beatdown against Tarleton State in week 2. They win their rivalry game against SMU in week 3 before they go and destroy Oklahoma. While the Oklahoma win is looking worse week by week, it was still a dominating victory and put TCU into the polls. This past weekend, they would go on the road and play number 19 Kansas, and while Jalen Daniels did get hurt, TCU pretty much led the entire game and held off against this year's Cinderella team to win 38-31. TCU is currently 5-0, and they're going to play the only other unbeaten Big 12 team this weekend, as they'll have Oklahoma State at home. This is their best start since 2017, and it's good to see TCU back on the map. USC is obviously a good football team, but they still haven't impressed me that much. In week 1, they would beat Rice before a week 2 road victory over Stanford. After that, they beat Fresno State before they had a late touchdown to beat Oregon State. That put them at 4-0 before they struggled to put away Arizona State, and then this past weekend beat Washington State. I obviously think USC is a good team, but they still haven't dominated the way I think they should, and they just don't pass the eye test for me yet. We'll find out a lot more this weekend though, as they're going to go on the road and play against number 20 Utah. This will not be an easy game for the Trojans. Let's see if this team is a contender or a pretender. After missing the college football playoff by 4 inches last year, Oklahoma State has come into the 2022 season on a mission. Just like UCLA and Ole Miss though, they didn't really play anyone in their first 3 games. They beat Central Michigan, Arizona State, and Arkansas Pine Bluff, but obviously none of those teams are that big of a deal. In their 4th game, they'd finally get an impressive victory as they would go on the road and beat number 16 Baylor. This past weekend, they would get Texas Tech at home, and while the Red Raiders actually took the lead in the second half, Oklahoma State's experience and talent showed as they would go on a run and punctuate a 41-31 win with a late rushing score. Oklahoma State is currently 5-0, ranked number 8 in the country, and now they have to go on the road to play number 13 TCU before games against Texas, Kansas State, and Kansas, all of which are ranked. If Oklahoma State is for real, then they'll find a way to get through the schedule. Michigan is slowly getting better week by week, but I still think there are a couple of flaws in this team that could hold them back from winning the Big Ten. In their first 3 games, they blew out Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn, and obviously those were 3 of the worst teams in the country, so it didn't mean much. They then only beat Maryland by 7 at home, only won by 2 scores against Iowa, and then this past weekend struggled midway into the second half against Indiana. All 3 of those teams are decent, middle-of-the-pack Big Ten schools, and while Michigan is obviously 6-0, I'm really curious to see how they're going to do against the schools like Penn State, Illinois, and Ohio State. Currently, all 3 of those are ranked, and I think Michigan's passing game has to get a little bit better if they want any chance in those. For now though, Michigan is legitimate, and they're hoping to march towards another playoff appearance. Before we get into the top 5, be sure to let me know your thoughts down below, and leave a like if you're enjoying today's video. At number 5, I have Tennessee. They've jumped up a few spots after they now have 3 top 25 victories. In week 1, they would beat Ball State before they went on the road and beat Pittsburgh, and before they went on the road and beat number 17 Pitt 34-27. They'd come home with a dominating victory over Akron before they'd hold off Florida's late comeback and win that game. The Volunteers started out 4-0, and then this past weekend, they survived a trap game against LSU. The Tigers came into the game ranked number 25 in the country, but they screwed up from the opening kickoff as Jake Beck muffed the kick, and then Tennessee dominated to a 40-13 victory. It's been a good first 5 games for Tennessee, and while there is legitimate playoff hype right now, we're going to find out what they're made of as number 3 Alabama will come to town. This is probably the game of the year in the SEC. College game day will be there, and this is the biggest game in Rocky Top in probably a decade, so I'm super pumped for this. But for right now, Tennessee is legit. A couple of days ago, I made a video about how Alabama needs to figure out their wide receiver core or they're going to be in trouble. A lot of those same problems were on full display on Saturday night, as they barely survived against Texas A&M. It didn't help that Milroe consistently turned the ball over, but right now, Alabama has a couple of flaws in this team. They beat Utah State in week 1 before they barely survived against Texas in week 2. They then go back home for dominating victories over UL Monroe and Vanderbilt before they go on the road and beat Arkansas. Arkansas is continually falling off week by week, but then this past weekend, they obviously got a huge test from A&M. This game literally came down to one play, and had Haynes King looked anywhere else except for the outside of the end zone, A&M could have stole one, and Alabama would be in a much different spot. I don't really know what's going on with Bryce Young, but either way, Bama's going to have their toughest game of the year as they have to go on the road to number 6 Tennessee. As I said, this is the game of the year in the SEC, and we'll find out what both teams are made of. Clemson has now jumped up to number 3. Everyone was wondering if Clemson was going to put it all together this year, and right now, they're marching towards the college football playoff. DJ Uiagalelei looks a lot better, and the team just looks a lot more balanced in general. In week 1, they went on the road and beat Georgia Tech before they would beat Furman and Louisiana Tech at home. They would survive in overtime against number 21 Wake Forest before they would soundly beat NC State at home. Those were 2 big victories in a row, and then after starting out slow against Boston College, they turned it on in the second half and won 31-3. Right now, Clemson's playing like they used to. They're dominating on both sides of the ball, and they have an opportunity to get back to the playoff. For now, they're number 3. Georgia now jumps back up to number 2. In week 1, they would dismantle number 11 Oregon 49-3, and that Oregon win continues to look better and better. In week 2, they beat Samford, and then in week 3, they beat South Carolina. In week 4, they would show struggle against Kent State before they were down nearly the entire game on the road against Mizzou. They made enough plays late though, and ended up winning 26-22 to get back to their 5-0 record. A lot of questions were asked about Georgia's performance, but this past weekend they put it all to rest as they'd kill Auburn 42-10, and they probably could have put up a lot more. I don't know if this says more about Georgia or about how bad Auburn is, but either way, Georgia is 6-0, and they're once again marching towards the college football playoff. We now get to the number 1 team in the country, and that is Ohio State. Everyone knew this year's Buckeyes team was going to be special, but now they're just flat out dominating teams. In week 1, they beat number 5 Notre Dame at home, before they would kill both Arkansas State and Toledo in week 2 and 3. In week 4, they would dominate Wisconsin, and in week 5, they'd dominate Rutgers. That got them off to a 5-0 start, but people were still hesitant to make them the number 1 team in the country. This past weekend, they went on the road and dominated Michigan State from start to finish, and now this offense looks unstoppable, and in my opinion, they're the number 1 team in the country. The Buckeyes are 6-0, ranked number 2 in the country, and have a couple of fun games coming up against Penn State and Michigan. I think the Buckeyes are headed towards a national championship, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. So yeah, in today's video, we ranked all 15 undefeated teams left, went through who they are, why I have them ranked there, and gave my overall thoughts on them. But now I'd like to hear from you guys. What did I get right and wrong? Who do you think is the best team in college football? And what topic should I do in my next video? Be sure to let me know down below, subscribe if you're new here, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.